Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I'm going to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about recently, and those are my favorite themes in board games at this moment. And here, the way that I'm going to approach this is through the board game category section on Board Game Geek. You can get to here if you go to Browse and you go to Categories here. Now, I thought this was the best way to kind of conglomerate a lot of the most common themes into one overarching, description, because there are thousands of different themes and different settings that board games explore, especially if you take into account all of the games that we have up to date. But in this categorization, it may or may not be outdated, but I feel like they do a pretty good job at once again conglomerating a lot of those different themes into a certain category, such as by mechanisms such as like bluffing or card games using dice, etc. But there are also themes here like, the American Civil War, for example. And so I went off of these to choose my top 5 favorite themes that not only I enjoy in games that I play now, but also themes that may catch my eye when I'm looking at new board games to try. Of course, I'm looking at board games from different theme or from different mechanisms rather, in how they play and what kind of mechanisms they use for gameplay. I think that is important for me for sure. But after playing so many board games, and I have come into this hobby relatively more recently than perhaps many of you, so it may be even more true for you, but for me, like, I feel like all the games that I'm looking at now, whether I play them or whether I view them or demo them, a lot of the mechanisms start to blend with each other. And the only thing that really separates games, aside from a few mechanically unique approaches or combinations of mechanisms, is really the theme. Like, you can choose a certain theme or a certain mechanism like worker placement, and then have like your definitive music game that is involved with worker placement, etc., or vice versa as well. And so I I feel like I'm at the point where theme really matters to me. If I want to put myself in a setting in a board game and have a relatively good understanding of how to play the game, then I think what would elevate me or elevate my opinion of the game is the theme that it's set in, as well as how well those mechanisms integrate with the theme. So, in any case, and of course, a lot of these themes that are near and dear to me come from a nostalgic background in gaming that I've had outside of board games, usually in the video game and PC format. And so I'm going to highlight some of those, highlight some of my favorite games that are included in some of these favorite themes, and we'll go and start from the top. So before I get into my official list, I do want to talk about an honorable mention, because I did consider this game, it's pretty close to my number 5, and that is the environmental list or categorization of theme. To me, this includes games like Ark Nova and Life of the Amazonia, where you're technically in like Life of the Amazonia, uh, creating a habitat that you are trying to help conserve the forestation and animals that are included there in that environment that you're building on your tableau, as well as Ark Nova, where it is about conservation and doing that through zoo management, essentially. And so environmental games, there are other games that I could throw on here, such as Cascadia, for example, that are more nature themed, I suppose, or involve the grandiosity of nature, and it's a really cozy theme. I don't want to say that I particularly go for games that include animals or things like that, plants, for example. But anything that does involve a more naturistic theme, I think, is something that I'm genuinely interested in. But there are so many of those games out there that span the range of complexity as well, that it's hard to keep track of and really hone in my interest and the time allotted to me to really discover and look into games, to really kind of grasp what is going on in this particular theme. So for that reason, I am putting this at number 6. I do really enjoy the theme in games. Obviously, I love both of these games that I've listed here on the page, but there are so there are so many other games that I would love to include on this list as well, but I just don't. I guess there are just so many games in this list that it's hard for me to keep track of, and so that's why it's at my number 6. So, my number 5 theme is going to be medical. And the medical or medicine theme is near and dear to me, of course, because of my profession. I am in the medical field as a physician. And so it, of course, draws me in or intrigues me if a game does feature a medical component to it. I put this as at number 5, one, because there's not a lot of choices to choose from that are, of my top favorite games. I, of course, include Pandemic here. Most of the top games that are medical related are related to Pandemic in one way or the other, whether it's a legacy game or an expansion or a spin-off, etc. And for me, Pandemic is nostalgic because it is one of the first games, quote unquote, modern board games that I played as a teenager that really got me thinking about board games and being interested in them at the very least, until I, many years later, really dove farther into the hobby. But Pandemic introduced, new concepts that modern games have, such as a cooperative game. Up until then, I don't think I had ever really played a cooperative game, and of course, Pandemic did a lot to make that genre of gaming really shine. In the mid 2000s. But in addition to that, I never knew that games could have expansions to them, and so Pandemic introduced that concept to me, that you could expand upon games like you would DLC with video games, currently or in the past. If you had uh, hardware to put into your N64 or something like that, you could do that as well. But anyway, so Pandemic is the flagship game for me when it comes to modern board gaming, as well as the medical themed board game. Of course, I was not in the medical field at that point in time, but it still sticks with me, and I think about it when I am at work sometimes. And in addition to that, there are a lot of medical games that are out there. Some of the ones that stood out to me that I've personally enjoyed were Healthy Heart Hospital that I played recently. Messina 1347 is categorized as a medical game as well. These are some of my favorite games that I enjoy to play now, but are medical in theme. But not to miss out, and I do include games like Dice Hospital, Clinic, etc. And I really spoke a lot about this in my episode and review of Healthy Heart Hospital. But a lot of medical related games offer the point of view of either hospital management or administration. And when you do get down to the treatment level, a lot of it is quote unquote order fulfillment, or utilizing resources in a way to fulfill a patient's needs. And I go into more detail about how I feel like that is a gameplay abstraction of what happens in real life, which is appropriate for games, but may not reflect wholly what does happen in real life in the medical field, at least from the point of view from a physician. But in any case, I do hope that more games in the medical field continue to come out, because there aren't a lot. There's only about 400, almost 500 games out of the thousands of games that are listed in Board Game Geek that are tagged with the medical categorization. And so, it'll be nice to see more games come out in this regard. But two, it'll be really cool to see games approach medicine from a slightly different point of view, maybe in a more realistic way, to capture what it is like to treat patients as a physician, for example, or to run a certain portion of the hospital, whether it's the lab or what have you. Maybe that will come out at some point in the future, but until that happens, my eye is still on the lookout for what the board game space regarding medicine will look like, and that is why it's at my 5th spot. So my 4th favorite theme would be city building, and this harkens back to a time where I would love to play games like SimCity and like Railroad Tycoon, etc., that featured a lot of these games where you are building out a city, planning out where certain tiles or certain aspects of the city were, and managing things in an economic way. And I feel like city building is translated to that in board games in a way that I enjoy, where there is often a lot of chances for interaction, either with other players or usually building out your own tableau and having something appear, and be the labor that you have, like the fruits of your labor at the end of the game, basically, that you get to see. And from researching this topic as well, I feel like city building does branch out to much more than what you would envision a game like SimCity is, where you are building a modern city. So games like that, I mean, I consider Tiny Towns as a good example of that, and like Underwater Cities is kind of like a sci-fi spin on that city building thought as well. Lisboa, you have those more historic themes where the setting is a certain town or a certain city in the world, whether it's modern or ancient, and you are doing your things there. So I take into account some of the older cities or older games that take place in a time frame in a city that is older. So like Lisboa would fit. But in addition to that, games like Glass Road is considered a city builder because you are developing a certain area. You are placing out tiles onto a board, in this case a tableau, to create not just like a city where people are living in, but kind of a community. And so you could expand potentially the theme of city building into more community building. And that encompasses a lot of different games. There are games like Ore et Labora and Le Havre that account for this as well, according to Board Game Geek. And Caylus is another game that came to mind as well that I really enjoyed. But it is a really broad category, and I often don't think of city building as including some of these more community type experiences where you are laying down tiles on a board, or whether it's shared or in front of you, and kind of creating the synergies that you're hoping to get for abilities and points as well. A lot of these games feature mechanisms. I guess you could call it a mechanism, but more of a component, not requirement, but a feature, where these games have a lot of individualized tiles or characters or cards or what have you that create a lot of different combinations and synergies that you get through repetitious play. And so I really enjoy that aspect that is often found in some of these more community/city building games. And I think that is why I am usually intrigued when a new city building game is announced. Next, my number three theme is going to be industry or manufacturing, as it is listed in Board Game Geek. This is a really broad topic and theme once again because it covers a lot of ground, say, in history as a time frame, as well as the topic at hand. I've seen games like Terraforming Mars is an industrial game. I think a lot of these games could be linked towards another categorization, which is, I think, more mechanical in nature, which is economy or economical, where a lot of the decisions in these games are driven around the resource of money and how you have it's not broken down into finite pieces of like wood or sheep or what have you to pay for certain things in the game. It's all conglomerated in the form of money, and so it is up to you to divide your money in a way that makes it as most efficient as possible to take your actions turn by turn in the game. And so a lot of these games, I feel, as you are not only talking about industry, but you're like the head of management of a certain industry, usually in this time frame, which I really enjoy, which is like the Industrial Revolution, I think is my preferred era of like industry. And so games like Brass, of course, and the whole system of games that comes from that, including Birmingham, is a great example of just that gritty nature of making ends meet in the early portion where technology, or portion of time where technology is starting to boom, and you're mixing the old world with the new age of how things are done in the world, right? And so it's just that nature of like exploration is just really fascinating to me. And so I really enjoy games like Brass. Anno 1800 as well is really fun. I mean, even games like, which aren't listed officially, I feel like in industry, but like Yokohama, Newsfjord as well by Rosenberg kind of fit this bill as well. Barrage, of course. The list goes on and on because a lot of these top games are set in this time period. I should say a lot of these top Martin Wallace games, right, are set in this time period and in this setting and theme. And so I think as a whole, because of the nature of using money as your main resource and the way that you take actions with, and pay for them, I think it allows for a lot of thought that comes with, efficiency and making sure that you have enough money to do everything that you want to do, and thus the really tight decisions on how you use your money and grow your income to get more money to do better actions as the game progresses is something that is highly skilled, or at least skill worthy, and able to be more competitive. And um, it's not as straightforward as it might seem, and so there's a lot of strategy behind a lot of these games, particularly in the weight class that I have chosen here to represent this theme. And so, yeah, I really enjoy the challenge that comes from having a lot of different options available to you because of money. I mean, you can throw Ark Nova as another example of this, where a lot of the currency is based off of how many credits you have, and so how you allocate those credits throughout the game is how you gauge how efficient you were and how many points ultimately you score in the game. And so, yeah, lots of skill involved, lots of opportunity and potential for repetitious play, and a high skill ceiling as well, make this theme kind of fit in that bill, because I feel like that represents what it was like to be the head of management or running a certain business type in this time, this time period in our history. You had to be very shrewd with your money and frugal, and look for efficiencies here and there. And so while that does sound like a headache in real life, it's nice to kind of experience that in a more abstracted way in a couple of hours on a table. And so that is ultimately why I really enjoy industrial games and look for those when new ones come out. So my number 2 theme is farming. So this might be a shock to some of you, because for me, what I try to promote on this channel is Uwe Rosenberg, who is the linchpin of farming games, I suppose, in the board game sphere. But just hear me out. So I'll start with why I enjoy farming. I've talked a lot about this in the past episodes of the podcast and the channel. Farming games were something that was just very cozy and very welcoming to me. Growing up, I played a lot of games like Harvest Moon. Of course, Animal Crossing is kind of in that similar vein, but a lot of people play Stardew Valley, for example, in today's day and age. But these games are and were something that I love to come back to. It's just something really cozy and I guess relaxing when it came to this theme, as you just tend to your farm, make improvements here and there, etc. Right, and so it was just a fantastic experience that I had growing up, and something that I feel like defined what I was looking for in games as I was searching them out about 5 years ago. And that's when I stumbled upon Agricola. I thought, hey, this looks like a game that reminds me of Harvest Moon. Of course, it was not as easy as a game such as that, but Agricola really opened my eyes to what board gaming can be like. And so the theme of it is, I feel like, very thematic, and that's part of the reason why I really enjoy farming games, and of course Rosenberg games. I think he does this very well, is the thematic integration of farming with mechanisms and how you play the game. I love the fact that you can plant crops and gain extra resources back, because that's how it works in real life, right? You put a couple of animals together, and lo and behold, you have more animals the next spring, etc. Right? And so there are a lot of different reasons why there are thematic integrations that I really enjoy in games from Rosenberg, such as Agricola. A Feast for Odin is technically a farming game as well. I believe it is listed as an industrial game too, but I think I'll put it as more of a farming game. It's kind of its own thing, I think, more of a Viking game, right? You also have other games in Rosenberg's line that are not pictured here, such as Fields of Arla, and a lot of the other games that I've mentioned before, Caverna, of course, being the sequel to Agricola. But you have a lot of non-Rosenberg games that are really good, such as Viticulture, for example, that capture the essence of what farming and agriculture represent. And so, yeah, it's just a really cozy thing. Even though these games may not be cozy, they're very time-intensive and thinky and require a lot of thought and repetitious play. But at the same time, if I'm, for example, playing these games solo and I come down and put on some relaxing farming sounds or farming music, right? It's just a really good space to be in, personally, for me. It's a good mental space to be in. And so I always, even though if a game is really competitive and, I'm having a really, I guess, I'm just sweating it out, trying to figure out the best moves and be as efficient as possible, farming games for me just really put me, at least in the back of my mind, in a headspace that I feel calm and relaxed. And that's something that I try to pursue as I'm, exploring this hobby and participating in this hobby. It's something that I can have fun with and relax. And I think that's why farming games are really exciting and sought after for me. Now, why is it not my number one theme? Even though Rosenberg has a lot of these games that I really enjoy, outside of Rosenberg, I feel like the farming theme can really vary as far as the complexity goes, and the rules complexity and strategic weight of games are very varied. And so games, I feel like in the farming theme, are often more light, to sum up, lighter than what I'm hoping to get out of a good game that I feel like I would return to many times. More along the lines of, say, like Bonanza, or some of those. Of course, there are really complex games that are farming themed, but I feel like I've at least known about or have played most of those. I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but for the most part, I think the farming theme is usually on the lighter side when it comes to rules complexity than I would prefer. And so, I'm always excited for a more crunchy experience, but oftentimes those are going to be another Rosenberg game that offers a farming type of theme. So that is why farming is my number two. So I believe my favorite theme in all of board gaming is civilization. So this stems back to what I grew up playing the most. I think I dedicated the most hours, to Age of Empires. That was Age of Empires 2 particularly. That was my game on the PC growing up on that old Windows 95. And what I like about those games is the sense of growth that the game provides, where you start off, say, in the ancient times, the Stone Age or something like that, where you have very little and you're taking baby steps to making and progressing up. The second thing, which I really enjoy, is like technology tracks, right? And really differentiating yourself along a certain way, or like with asymmetric cultures or factions, to allow for a push in a certain direction to really create an identity of what your civilization or culture is. And so back to the first point, you start out small, but then by the end of the game, you've expanded so far, in the land that you're allotted. You've created a lot of different technologies. You've progressed through time as well, and you are able to do so much on your turns. And the third thing that I love about these games, there is a lot of interaction. There's an element of interaction, whether that is through military or through the competition of culture or what have you, through points. And there are different ways that you can represent this, but I love the abstraction of civilization mechanically through a lot of these means, where you are growing from a small culture to an epic, civilization. But and two, there's a lot of interaction. But three, it does tell the story. It often tries to tell the story of our humanity, our history. And so I love coming into a board game and learning more and playing as a certain, ancient civilization that I learned about in school. It's fun to remember some of those times. I think one of my favorite subjects in school was history, aside from like science and stuff. But I really enjoyed my history class and learning about our own history, world history as well. And so I think that is just something that I love to look at in board games. And I will say that as you can see, it does constitute a lot of the games that I enjoy in general through the ages. Age of Civilization by Jeffrey CCH, including his new game, Epochs. Mosaic, right? A lot of these games that I've talked about on the channel are civilization and themed. Clash of Cultures that I've done recently as well is another one. Tapestry. You throw out all of these really, fun games that may or may not be as close to thematic integration as you might hope for, but do have the backdrop, at the very least, of a civ building game. And so that's something that I love to be in the headspace of, for the reasons mentioned before. But even just looking at this year, like I'm looking at the games that I'm most interested in Gen Con. I did my video on maybe some of the sleeper hits that I believed Gen Con would provide. So I didn't really get to talk about some of the games that I'm most interested in. A lot of those games are going to be coming out in Essen, so I'll address those then. But a lot of these games, such as Beyond the Horizon, I think it's called Alte, Civilization by Stefan Feld. A lot of these games, and if you recall from the past couple of years as well as I've done this channel, I just feel like a lot of the games that I've been most interested in have some sort of civilization theme to it. It does not have to be about our history. It could be about any civilization progressing. So you think of games like Revive and Terra Mystica, even Gaia Project, with a more sci-fi type of theme to it, also are represented in this theme, and just in the sense of how games progress thematically and mechanically through the growth of your civilization or culture. It's just really fascinating to me, and I think it's my number one because of how interested I am in games that I'm previewing and looking at further in the horizon, right, in the future. They're most likely games that are civilization themed, and so to me that's why it beat out Farming, despite the Rosenberg adoration that I have for his games. I feel like when I am thinking about other games outside of that sphere of what I consider my preferred games, most preferred games, if I'm just looking out at the general populace of games that are offered, I think I am more inclined to look at civilization games first. So there you go. Those are my top 5 favorite themes in board games. Let me know what your favorite theme in games is, and or themes are, and I'd love to continue this chat in the YouTube comments, wherever you would like to reach out on Board Game Geek as well. Thank you for all the positive support and the feedback, and everything is appreciated, and it's just an added bonus to be able to communicate with those who genuinely want to listen to what I have to say. So thanks for consulting with me today, and hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.